second year class is doing Neapolitan chords right now, and they did Sonata Form last term, and so we'll be reviewing Sonata Form with variants and the ways that it sort of evolves from classical into the Romantic era. And one of the most famous places for Neapolitan chords is Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Sonata number 14, opus 27, number 2, first movement. It wasn't called Moonlight until later. He actually thought it was like Sonata Fantasy. Anyhow, when we learn Sonata Form in the class, we teach the very most sort of strict classical, and then as they understand that, they get good at seeing variations on that, but they see the principles, and I make them these flashcards, and they have to practice, and so they'll turn them over and go, oh, in this case, we're only going to do the exposition of Moonlight Sonata right here, and so they flip over the cards and go, okay, so there's a theme 1, it's in the tonic key or home key, and these are random, so they go, well, there's an intro, it's possible, it doesn't have to have that, but it could, and they flip another one over and they go, Coda, that would be at the end of the exposition. Theme 2 will be in the middle, and repeat sign comes at the end of the coda, so you repeat this whole section again. Transition 2 obviously comes after theme 2, but the important thing here is that they see that it's in the dominant or relative major key. When we add on the recapitulation, the keys are different, stays in the tonic key, transition 1. So they learn their sonata form this way, and again, this is just the exposition. Possible intro. Theme 1 is typically in the tonic key. Transition section that takes us from the tonic key, and the usual targets are the dominant key or the relative major. Theme 2 will be in whichever one of those that's in. Transition will stay there but be forward moving and unstable, usually in the harmony or the way the harmony is presented, and then a terminative area or a coda, and then it repeats. So that's your standard exposition. Now, some textbooks will find that this is too specific because it doesn't account for some of the changes that Beethoven explores in X, and then everybody sort of continues to evolve the form after him. So they start saying like not theme 1 area, but theme 1, like subject 1 or motive 1, because Beethoven would boil his, over time he started to go and boil his themes down into motive ideas. The most famous is the Fifth Symphony, da 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 da, short, long, same, down, right? And transition, well, they kind of start to get blurred together. And same thing for theme 2 and transition 2, they call this secondary theme area. And he would sometimes give his coda section its own motive, and then it was called not a coda but a closing section. And he did other things too. As he progressed in his career, he starts to mess with it. You can still see that the ideas of introducing a theme and then transitioning to other keys and then a counter theme of some kind, and then but these things started to become sort of developmental in their own right because he liked to work with his motives so much. Anyhow, that's the review that the class will do, and then we'll look at this and we'll see that it has the sonata form, except some of these internal things in the exposition kind of get mushed up. We're going to find that it's not clear that there's a coda or closing area. It's not even clear that there's exactly transitions. Starts to get blurred up, and like I said, this is quasi-fantasy. According, he takes liberties with the form, but that's okay. We're still going to see a theme 1 area, transition to other keys, another theme area, and then eventually it has to come to the end. No repeat sign in this. Interestingly, he just goes straight into the development. So yeah, let's try this out. Now, instead of going through each one of these sections and saying, what's this chord? Let's spell it out, because that takes a lot of time, like I might do with the chorales, and I've done with a couple other things. I've just written the chords in. This is a really good piece if you want to start saying, well, I know how to spell my chords. let me go in and find them because it's real easy to see the chords. He's got this ostinato, right? This repeated. You can hear it, and it's easy to see. That being said, it can get confusing in places because not all the notes of the chord are always present, and sometimes he does some alterations to the chords as well. I think the biggest challenge in analysis here is knowing when one of these mini sections, like is there an intro, when does the theme 1 come on, when are we in transition 1, when has the second theme started? And it's difficult to look at all this because texturally it's very similar, and we can spot things, like there's the beginning of a motive idea, and that's our theme 1. But between that and then, because of the change of keys and things, and because Beethoven will use exotic chords as well as changing keys, it starts to get difficult for a student to say, where is, what is this chord and how does it fit functionally? So I'll show you how I would go about doing this. And if you're one of my students looking at this now, this will be a reminder for you, but we need to look for cadences. Cadences confirm keys. And once you know what key you're in, then you can go back and interpret the chords according to that key. Okay? And there's half cadences and there's authentic cadences, plagal cadences, those kind of things. But the most convincing cadence is, of course, an authentic cadence. Perfect authentic would be even better. And then amongst that, there's a specific format of a cadence, an authentic format that gets real popular because with things shifting around and stuff, there's nothing better than to say, I'm going to do go 1, 6, 4, 5, or 5, 7. And this is an ornamented 5 chord that then goes to my 1. So instead of just going like 5, let's see, I guess I'll stay in this key that we're in, although most of these are in different keys. You're going to get, something that sounds like this, and then it's going to go to here, right? And that's good. That's your authentic cadence. But even stronger than that, to denote that, is to wind up with ornamenting with a 1, 6, 4. It's not just the notes itself, it also gives more length and sort of announces that the cadence is coming up. And so that would sound like this, then it'd be like, right? And then those notes resolve down to there. And then finally, like that. And if you can get good at spotting that configuration of a cadence in this exposition of Moonlight Sonata, that's Beethoven's way of telling you that we've come to the end of a section, and it can confirm the key that you're in, and you can go backwards from there. I'll give you an example of that. And I'm gonna zoom in now, I think, so that we can get more in the camera. But I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. So these first 4 measures are our introduction. Okay, and it's probably the most famous one. Everybody knows this sound where you hear this, and then the bass note passes down, and then we get to here, right, with the 6th chord. And surprise, this is our Neapolitan chord. And then here it is right now as we finish up here, okay? You can see that this is so, and do. This is my 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. And it's a little more complicated than that because Beethoven loves to do so many things. He's going to do, it's like a 5, 7 chord right there. So it's gonna be, let's see, gotta look over without looking at my hands here. As I'm turning, right? So there's a 5, 7, it's a G7, G sharp 7, and then he goes 1, 6, 4 right here. And then he goes back to the G chord, but it keeps the C there, so it's a G sharp sus chord. And then finally, he's going to give us the full 5, 7, drops down to the F sharp, and then But you can see that timing, it's a fancy one of these, right? Fancy one of these guys right there. Here, it's, you know, and then it goes to the one, which then you get your full-on textural 3, you know, like, etc. Okay, so this is our intro. We have identified that. And it's in the key of C sharp, which makes sense because this is in C sharp minor, and we're not gonna go crazy yet, changing keys and things like that. So now we can identify these chords, okay? If we know we're in C sharp minor up to here, right? So C sharp minor chord here with the C sharp in the bass is my 1 chord. And now it depends on how you want to look at this. If you call this a passing note going down, then you just, you know, bracket it and say non-chord tone. Or if you think it's a 7th of the chord, you can go 1 with a 3rd inversion figured bass symbol. Either one of those is fine. Unless I want people to be practicing figured bass, I just think of it as a passing note. This is my 6th chord, and 6 chords are major in the minor key, like that. And D, natural, is flat 2. Flat 2 major chord is Neapolitan. So we mark that with an N. And it's in 1st inversion, like it likes to be most of the time with the 3rd there. And it's basically a substitute for 2, because it's a flat 2 major 7 chord, which means that here, this is my 5-7 with a little 1-6-4 and a 5 sus chord, and then proper 5-7. That's just ornamentation on all of that right there. And then I have my C sharp minor chord again, which is 1 right there. Okay, so he's pretty straightforward. Now, this is an interesting chord. It's not by accident. He didn't just wake up and go like, oh, I like the sound of that. I'm just going to throw that on there. I mean, he did like the sound of it, and he is just throwing it on there. However, he's also signaling to you that this is going to be a feature in much of the music. He's very subtle about how he'll use it in different ways, but it's going to be there, okay? So the theme kicks in, and this is, right? And then that feels like a cadential figure to me, right? And if we look at it, well, do you see this B, B, E? This is like 5-5-1, okay? But it's not in the key of C sharp minor anymore. This is, well, let's look at the chords there. Again, this is an E major chord here, but look, the B is in the bass. So that's a 6-4 inversion, right? And then this is a B7 chord right here. So that's a 7, a root position there. And this is just this cadence right here. I'll just play this out for you. So there's my notes right there and there. That's my 1-6-4 sound right there. And then, this is a 9th. I don't have big hands. Sorry. And then 1, right? Yeah. So 1-6-4, 5-7 cadence, right? Am I on there? Is that enough? Maybe I'll bring this up. It's tough to see because the camera's above my head right there. And that's 1. And that means that this functions like a 5 chord, right? So, yeah, it's a perfect authentic cadence at the end, right here, in case you're keeping track of that kind of stuff. So now what does that mean? That means that this first theme here, instead of going first theme done, transition, and now we're going to scooch off into the new key, right, which is typical sonata form, he's in his first theme or first idea area, and he's going to immediately start to transform and end up in the new key, right? So he's actually gonna modulate before we get out of the first theme, okay? Let's see what happens here. we can go in this direction in the key of C sharp minor, but we need to think about this direction going, how did he get there, right? So G sharp dominant 7 is my 5 chord. The B sharp are the thirds in the bass, so it's a 5, 6, 5, right? It's back in the key of C sharp minor. And C sharp minor is obviously 1, right? We like going 1, 5, 1. It's basic stuff there. F sharp minor is 4. That also fits in there. And heck, this is 3. Although generally speaking, 4 doesn't go to 3 in the key, you know, that we're in. I think we can find what we call a pivot chord or common chord modulation. If you want, think in the key of E major, relative major, right? Then this is my 2 chord, right? In the key of E major, F sharp minor is 2, right? And you can even go back further and say in the key of E major, C sharp minor is 6, like that. Here or here, we have to change key. And this is typical, by the way, of the time. It's called a common chord or pivot chord modulation. You find a chord that is partway into the phrase and it's got function in the old key and function in the new key. So somewhere here, we're in the key of E major. Whether you decide it's there because we had our 1, 5, 1 and then we move on, you know, so you could put it here or you could put it here. It doesn't really matter. But now why the key of E? What's the relative major? I'm just going to take a moment here and say that if we were in a normal sonata form, we would be in C sharp minor and we would be going to the key of either G sharp minor, because that's the dominant, right? Or we'd be going to the relative major, which is E major, right? And that's my relative major. Those are my 2 normal destinations, and it seems as though that's what Beethoven is doing. Now remember, this is written just a couple years before he starts working on the 5th Symphony, which means maybe 3 years, 4 years before that. And he's clearly in his middle period of work, which means that he is, he's still got all the classical training and style things from Haydn, but he's now maturing and he's branching off and being very individualistic. So it doesn't surprise me that first off, there's innovations or distortions, mutations to the form, but that he will also maybe go to different keys and things like this, okay? So with this cadence right here, I think we finished theme 1, right? We can call this theme 1, right? Or theme 1 area. And from here on out, I think we're in the transition area, right? Moving forward, except that the transition normally is the place where we would change from the first key to the second key. Don't worry, Beethoven's going to do that anyways. He's got other ideas. The first thing he does after he gets here, and we know that we've ended the section because we've had this cadence, okay? But we get here and we get this sound right there with the and then next measure, right down here, it becomes E minor like this. It's like all of a sudden, what just happened? Right? Right. So, like, did we just go to E minor? That's a good question. Is it just modal borrowing for some reason, for characteristics? Or having established that we're here now, is he transitioning somewhere else? And I think, hopefully you know this piece or you've taken the time to listen through to it, but I'm just going to scan ahead. I'm going to look for another cadence coming up here. And again, I'm looking for the same issues of like criteria with all these different things going on. Sure, we can find some 5-1 relationships and things like that. Like there's an F sharp dominant 7 right there, which would tell me that's 5 of B, right? But it could be a secondary dominant, right? Or we could be in B. And so we're going to look for a strong cadence with that 1, 6, 4, 5, 1 kind of thing. And as I look along here, and I've gone through here all the way through, there's, like I said, there's a 5, 7 kind of chord right there. And there's my B, And then, but if you look here, this right here goes. Right? It's like, well, 1, 5, 1, and the timing is right, and everything's there. And if I actually just play that, you're gonna hear this kind of sound. So I'm just gonna play this part. I want to make sure we're on camera. There we are. So there's my F sharp. So I'm in 6/4 inversion right there, and I've got this chord above. Right? I'm just playing the left hand right now, and I'm going to double up on the F sharps in the bass, and it's going to come. There's my 5, and then I'm going to go right. So, you know, that's really interesting. That feels like a 1, 6, 4, and a 5, and then a 1, just like that. And so here again, sort of says, well, that's the end of the section right there. Okay? It definitely feels like a perfect authentic cadence as well. So now that we know that, we know that we're heading from the key of E right here into the key of B. And this transition's job is to get us there, okay? We can interpret these chords more than likely in the key of B minor, which is where it's heading to. And by the way, B minor is a little bit of a strange place to go to. It's the subtonic of C sharp minor. It is the dominant of E major, but it should have been B major. Anyhow, let's check this out then. Okay, just gonna stay right here for a second. So E minor, we were in E major, and now it's like we have E minor. Is it 1 modally borrowed from the relative after the parallel minor, or is it now that equals something in the new key? So if I'm in the key of B minor, E minor is 4, yes, in B minor, the key, right? And let's have a look at some of these other chords here then. Okay, G7, G dominant 7. Well, G is the scale degree in B minor. It's 6, right? 6, but it should be a major 7 chord, right? So this is not a major 7 chord. It's been turned into a dominant, which means it's more likely a 5 of something, and G is the 5 of C, and C is coming up. So we would write this as 5. It's got the D in the bass because it's coming down like it did at the beginning, at the top of the music right there in the bass line. It's kind of like its own little melody, right? So this is going to be 4/3 of C, right? It's not idiomatic to the key because it should have an F sharp and it doesn't. So it's of C, and we have to say, well, what is C? Not C sharp, but C. What is C in the key of B minor? Well, C equals flat 2 in B minor, and that's Neapolitan, which he told us he was going to do, right? So this is going to be a repeating idea. So this is 5/4/3 of Neapolitan, which is code for flat 2, and this is Neapolitan right here, right? Neapolitan. I think these are just passing tones, just like above. And then here, remember I'm in the key of B, this is an F sharp dominant 7, and 2 likes to go to 5, and that's my 5 chord in the key that I'm in. So this is 5/7, but third is in the bass, so that's going to be 5/6/5. Yep, this is working out. We're going to be heading to, we're in the key of B. I mean, we're there and we can interpret it that way, but it really announces itself as being done right there. So now let's look at this coming up right here. This is 1, which was good because that comes right after 5/6/5, right? 5/6/5. And then, well, I really like to ignore this C sharp here, like it's this neighbor for the top thing that goes in there and comes back. And if you do that, if you ignore the C sharp, then it's an E minor chord, which is another, you know, it's like 4 again, like that was there. Okay. I'd like to do that. I'd love to be able to just say, well, that's E, it's a 4, right? I'm just gonna put this in here because I like the idea of him reusing his chords like this, right? But even with the C sharp, and I think it's fine, then it's the C sharp half diminished 7, which is a 2 chord in the key of B minor. So we'll leave the C sharp in, and this is a 2 half diminished, and the E, so it's 6/5, right? And then the G, so it's 4/3 right there. And 2 chords love to go to 5 chords, just like 4 chords do as well. In fact, 2 chords have to go to 5 chords. You just got to play it and decide whether you hear this more like this with a non-chord tone C sharp, or whether you truly hear this as a half diminished 7th chord, right? But either way, they go to my 5 chord and 1. This has got to be the end of the transition, which means that this is coming up to theme 2, coming up here. And indeed, we get this new idea right here, which is and it does it again. It's not exactly a great, beautiful singing melody, right, compared to other things that he's written. But I think he's trying to not get in the way, right? Okay, so good. Here's where I think we're not gonna find a nice look at theme 2 and transition and then a coda, because the development starts right here. This is the development right here. So we are missing our repeat sign. We didn't get that. And we don't get clearly delineated end of the like theme 2 going into a transition, going into a clear coda, or codetta if you want to call it a small one, right? Those don't exist. But we can see that we have this theme that happens twice, and then it's different, and then it kind of skates down even further. And so you could say like, oh, this is my theme, this is my transition, and here's my coda or ending. I just say it's Beethoven. He's squishing this all together. He's saying this all does the same thing for me, right? I've managed to get to a new key, and then I managed to transition to an even surprise newer key, right? And then I will do a little bit of a theme, and then I will come to an end of the section. It does all those things, right? So now let's see what happens. I'm looking for this sort of figure again, right? And since I know this is the development, I see this here, right? 2 C sharps going to an F sharp, and I don't see the same kind, maybe here a little bit, but this is rising up. I don't think that's going to be it. I don't see anywhere else where that happens. This looks like it's my cadence, and I can use my theory as well to say, look, I end on an F sharp. This is it, F sharp, but it's got the C sharp in the bass, so that'd be like a 1/6/4. And then this is my 5 chord with the sus and then not the sus, which, by the way, is exactly kind of what he did right there at the beginning. So he's telling us he's going to do this, right? And so I can't help but believe that I'm in the key of F sharp minor here. That's my 1. Again, look at your cadences, right? That's my 1/6/4. Am I on camera? Yes, I am. And this is a 5 sus going to a 5 normal. This whole thing is a 1/6/4/5/1 cadence. I'll play this left hand for you. I mean, it's just C sharps on the top, but you're going to hear that that's definitely like a. And now we're going to get ourselves, you know, like the sus chord, and then the full version of the 5. Again, he lays in with a 3-part chord in the bass to really land it there, right? Like he did at the end of the introduction. Okay, so we're going to F sharp minor. That's really cool. It's not what we were expecting, but it's pretty cool. And we're going to round this up at the end with what about all these keys? Because Beethoven is saying, I'm not going to just go to the relative major or to the dominant. He's doing more than that. It's like he's trying to develop early, because development takes you to interesting keys, usually related or closer related keys, and rework material. And he's getting the jump on that already, because he's working with his motives already, and he's changing keys more regularly than you would expect in an exposition. That's okay. It's Beethoven, and it's important innovation. It sounds great too. All right, let's take a look at this. I think I'm in the key of B still for a while here, but eventually I'm going to be going to F sharp minor, okay? So let's just play nice in the key of B for just a little bit here at the beginning. So there's my cadence into B minor, and then here this. Now, it's a C chord, and I go major 7 because the notes are C, E, G natural, and B, which is a C major 7, right? But I gotta admit, this feels sus to me. This feels like a pedal tone or an ostinato pedal tone that's going through. He's letting you know that you're in the key of B. We've done things with pedal tones before, and he's just keeping this going through, right? Keeping it going through to let you know that we're in the key of B there until we start to change right there, right? And if we get rid of that, and here's the reason why I don't think that this is there. Let's just say it's a C chord, right? Well, ask yourself, what is C in the key of B minor? We did this before, but C equals flat 2, which is Neapolitan, right? So he says B minor and then Neapolitan. This is also not there, right? And this is my 6 right there, okay? And it's just arpeggiating up and then coming back down. And this is really interesting right here. Again, if you get rid of the B, you have an A sharp, a missing C sharp, right? Because it was C natural, but it's gone. But if you look at this, this is A sharp, C sharp is missing. I'm just gonna write it out, A sharp. You should have a C sharp there, but it's not there. But incomplete chords are a thing, right? And then E, and then G, natural still. That's A sharp, diminished 7. And that is 7 in the key of B. 7 diminished, and the E is going to be a 4-3 right there. And that makes sense because Neapolitans like to go to dominance, and 7 is a pseudo-dominant, which then takes us back to the 1 right there. So again, this thing with him signaling, I'm going to be doing this, right, happened down here, right? Happened again right here, Neapolitan. By the way, another really cool feature of this is that if you're still thinking you're back in the key of E minor or something like this, this is like lay, fi, so. It has a sort of a German or augmented 6 sound about it to approach the note from a half step above and then, right? This is really important because it creates the leading tone to go back into B. So he's having fun with that augmented 6, like pseudo-dominant sound. Okay, that's a topic for a different day. In fact, second-year students, after we get done with the Neapolitan, we talk about all these augmented 6s, and so probably come back and visit that again. This happens again right here. Like this here is the same as this. That there is the same as that. So we're just going to call this Neapolitan. Get rid of these guys right there. Right, and then it's like a Neapolitan chord. I mean, you can call this 6-4 if you like, right? But then this is my 7 diminished 4-3, which takes me to my 1 right there. All right, now remember that we are trying to get to the key of F sharp by the end of this section, which is again really strange to be done like that, but because normally we should have just been in E major and then spent the whole time in E major and be done in E major, and then we could have gone and done things, but he's hurried his way up there. So this is an interesting chord. It's an E sharp and a G sharp and a B and a D natural. And I'm just gonna, most of these I just said, well, we're not gonna spell them out, but I want you to see it, because most people that are students struggle a little bit in terms of spelling and recognizing cranky looking chords like this. Okay, this is D natural. Well, E sharp, G sharp, and B sharp would have been minor, but B natural is minor with a flat 5, which is a diminished, right? And then E sharp, G sharp, B sharp, D sharp would have been E minor 7, but we've lowered the 5th, and now we've lowered the 7th. So this is a diminished triad with a diminished 7. So this is a double diminished 7 chord, and that equals 7 diminished 7 in terms of sound, okay? And you have to ask yourself, if this is my 7, what's my 1? E sharp is 7 of F sharp. Neat. Okay, so we've seen it here. So this is 7 diminished, and it's a 4-3. Now, I think you have to ask yourself, are we in the key of F sharp now? And then we confirm it with a strong cadence at the end? Or is this just like a one-timey thing? But we're closing in on this very quickly. And so what I'd like to do before we, because this would be in F sharp minor, right? Let's go backwards from here, and I'll show you how this connects up, okay? So first off, here's another hungry chord. It's a B sharp diminished chord. If I've got it right, we'll double check it. B sharp, right? And then I've got a D sharp right there. And then F sharp because of the key signature. So that's my B diminished chord. And then our B sharp diminished chord, and then A would be a fully diminished 7. So it's B fully diminished 7. And that's going to equal 7 diminished 7. And B sharp is 7 of C sharp. And C sharp is my 5 chord, right? In the key of F sharp minor. So this here is 7 diminished. Again, the B sharp's in the bass, so it's, there we go, of 5 in this key. And look where we're headed to. We're headed to 5 right there, okay? Let's go backwards now. We're not going to get out of this without seeing this again. Here's a G major chord, G, B, D, naturals in place. If I'm in the key of F sharp minor, what's G? And you should be going like, oh, well, he's, if anything, he's consistent. G equals flat 2 in this key. It's a half step above on 2. So this is my Neapolitan right here. And it's got my third in the bass, so Neapolitan 6, which is the way we like to see these most of the time. So he's done it again. It was never going to not happen. He loves his Neapolitan chord. I love this piece to demonstrate that it can be used again and again and again. And has a certain flavor about it, so there's a consistency. Even though he's moving from key to key, he has this unique sounding progression that he uses. And so when you start to get used to hearing it from your ear training side, or just listening to this with knowledge a lot, you will always pick out that Neapolitan sound. It's unique and it's quite delicious. Okay, cool. I think we have to think of ourselves in the key of F sharp minor, right? So this will be a 1 chord right there. And this is a C sharp dominant 7. That's my 5 chord. And it's in first inversion, so 6-5. Now this is a 7 chord right there. And we can say this. We were in the key of B minor. We did our phrase, right? We did our second theme. And then we'll call it transitional, because it's kind of the same way that this was transitional as well afterwards, right? I'm not going to call it a transition. I mean, you can go like, is this a transition to? Some books won't even bother acknowledging that, right? It's messy enough that I don't think, and it's not clearly delineated enough, so I don't think so. I mean, I just think we say it's Beethoven. He squished this all together. It's fine. It's going to be all right, okay? But I do think we can say that in the key of F sharp, B minor is what? It's 4. And so now we're in the key of F sharp minor. And this was our pivot chord that happened. Just like when he shifted from E to E minor, and that became 4 in B minor that we were going on to. Super not random. super planned this all out ahead of time. So that's it right there, right? And not really a coda unless you want to call that a coda. But again, I just don't, I mean, yes. Or at one time, this could have been a transition and that could have been a coda, but it all got congealed together, and over time in Beethoven's head, it got shrunk into something really efficient. And you can't really call it that anymore. You can say it has its basis or roots in it, but that's about it, okay? And then we're on to the development. Okay, one last thing about these keys and stuff. So let's just review again. We knew what sonata form was supposed to be like, and we also know that we look at cadences to tell us the ends of sections, real strong cadences. And the strongest cadence is an authentic cadence, and the strongest version of that is when you go 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, as opposed to just 5, 1 or 5, 7, 1. And we see that again and again. And then what we do, just like a chorale, we say, oh, here's our cadence. What key are we in? We find our cadences, figures out the ends of the different sections, and then we build backwards and interpret our chords there. For this level of piece, you have to be able to distinguish enough to say, like, I don't see this as being important, let's get rid of them, or to not get really worried when you see that, you know, this is like, it's got a sus there, and you go, but wait, it's not a true C chord. It's like he's just holding this out like a suspension and coming down. So you have to be calm enough or experienced enough to say, yeah, it works. He's just Beethoven. He's giving it to us beautifully brocaded rather than just straight out, right? Once you have the cadences, you can interpret the chords. I just want to take a moment and I want to talk about the keys that you could go to. Let's grab another piece of paper. And this won't always work when you get to Beethoven and later people, even some Haydn as he gets on, and Mozart too, later in their life will do some interesting things. But you're always interested in relative keys and closely related keys. So we build this box. There's another way to do it with scales, but since this is visual, it's easier. So we're going to start in C sharp minor right here. Okay, the relative major is E major. And we did go there at the beginning of the, by the end of the first theme, we had transferred to there. So he did do that, right? And this is 4 sharps, yes? Okay, so we want to go to 5 sharps, and we want to go to 3 sharps as well, right? Because these are the related keys. Oh, I think I actually missed a chord now that I think about it. There was something I was going to mention that I forgot. Well, that would be, think about it. If we're going to go from here, this would be G sharp minor, right? And this would be B major, okay? And then one less would be F sharp minor and A major. Now, it's not incumbent on the composer to go to every one of these things, but they can. And in Beethoven's mind and time, he started to do one more thing, which was to say, it is a change of key, but it's not a modulation to go from C sharp minor to C sharp major. You get modal borrowing and things like that. So it's not a stretch to go from E major to E minor. And same thing, A major to A minor, and B major to B minor, right? I mean, they're not closely related, but they're just mode shifts. It's like a color shift from the close related keys. And F sharp major and G sharp major. Now, again, he's not going to use all of these any more than if you have a bunch of colors to paint with. You don't use all the colors. You use ones that work well together or mix nicely to achieve your goals. And it's rare to find a painting that uses every color in your palette, right? But, you know, he went from here to here, and then he shifted briefly immediately to there, which took us to there. And then from there, he took us to here. So we can see that it's not like, well, why did he do this? He is some kind of mad genius, but it didn't come from nowhere. This is training that he understood about. Now, there's one other, before I leave this, I just wanted to say that he does go from B minor to B major right there. See that? happened. I forgot to mention that. I saw that. And so this becomes like that. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting. It should then B major can be the 5 of E, right? And if you take away this C right here and this A sharp right here, and you just don't worry about that B, that is an E minor chord right there. So he's kind of having it both ways, right? He is getting his Neapolitan sound out of that, and he's also going B minor, shift to B major, which is kind of what we always wanted anyways. But then he says, no, it's 5 of E minor. So you could have gone in here and said 5 of 4 briefly. And then you could say that this is also, all of this is sort of a 4 chord going on in there as well. It's kind of cool. He's doing 2 or more things at one time. It's like a prophet that can tell you something that's true now and true in the future, and you're trying to, and the past. It's like he's got more than one level of harmony playing out, and depending on how you want to look at it, this way, that way, or the other way. He's not the only one that does this, but he's one of the first ones that really sophisticated at it. Brahms is also later on really good at this too, where you can see multiple ways of interpreting the harmony if you add one as a chord tone and not as a chord tone, or even if you take in some of his music, if you take it and just take the chords like this and then split them rhythmically like that so that they cascade like this, and you kind of go, it doesn't make any sense until you just bend it like that. And so they're having harmonies out of time that still work when they're out of time. It just is something else. So it's pretty cool. All right. Yeah, I imagine at some point I'll do another video where we talk about the development and take that separately. But it's a bigger and much more interesting and complicated thing to do. So for right now, hopefully that's useful for you. As a student, you get the chord progressions and you get to think about why we're in the different keys and stuff like that. If you're a young teacher and you're trying to figure out how to explain this kind of thing, you know, knock yourself out and use it. If you disagree with me, sorry. I mean, it's normal to have people have different opinions on things. I could have even made a mistake here. I'm not proofreading. I'm just doing this on the fly. So, okay, thanks, and I will see you sometime later. Bye.